Welcome to ModCast, a civilization podcast focused on game modding. Rob, R8XFT.
Vice Virtuoso.
Narai.
Yes.
Welcome to ModCast 76 with me, Rob, R8XFT. Today, joining me are...
Lee S.
Narai the Forgiven.
Fantastic. So, how are you, gents?
Oh, doing good.
Good. We've got no guests, just the three of us, but we do have plenty of things to talk about.
One of the challenges that I've had with people who want to see Colonialist Legacies come back, whether they're former members of Colonialist Legacies or whether they are fans, is that they all kind of expect me to jump back in to Civ 6 with the same level of wacky designs as we saw in Civ 5, and I don't have that capability yet. I gotta crawl before I walk, and walk before I run.
Yeah, there's a certain amount of that going on, and has been since Civ 6 came out, I think. So many of us moved on from Civ 5 to Civ 6, but I think to a certain extent the fan base kind of forgot that it took us a long time to get where we were with Civ 5.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to say Colonialist Legacies was always a groundbreaking mod studio, if you will, although some of that was just because we stole from Last Sword's Lua skills in the early days. But I also came in like a year after Brave New World was out, and so everything that was a really hard secret had already been more or less broken open. There was a few things left, but it wasn't like this, where I'm having to learn what a modifier even is, and people are having to look at the data structure to find out how things go together, and we're not even sure what half of them even mean, or how half of them even trigger. Like, I'm really hoping somebody writes a guide at some point that says this effect applies in this way and triggers in this way when the settings are like this.
Some of our fan base needs to understand that it's still taking us time to work through and figure out actually how the game works.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, we got a new expansion that came out, all the stuff that was added by that only came out in February. And it's only early April, so it's going to take us a while to work through exactly how a lot of this stuff actually does work. I'm really impressed with the people who have been putting out Rise and Fall mods that they figured out as much as they have.
Yes, some of that is kudos to Firaxis for not shaking the boat too much in terms of the existing modding things. I mean, I do know you can look at Chimpanzee's spreadsheet and see there's a good 24 modifiers that disappeared, and a good 24 that came back in, right, between the patches and the expansion, but it wasn't like that they gutted entire systems, which happened in Gods and Kings, for example. Rise and Fall definitely broke a lot of mods, but not to the extent that Gods and Kings did back in Civ 5. What we can and cannot do just exists by their own convenience, so it just means it was convenient for them to not change everything. But it is nice.
Yeah. First of all, we're going to have a chat about our own projects. We do spend a lot of the ModCast talking about our guest projects, but we thought it might be nice just to talk about our own for one of the ModCasts. Narai, what are you up to?
So I've started actually building a mod this time for Civ 6, the Blackfoot, bringing them back out from Civilization 5 and moving them in. It's been a kind of an interesting process of starting with a mod that you already built for Civ 5. There's a kind of a temptation to just take all of the same ideas and elements and put them into Civ 6. But the problem is that Civ 5 and Civ 6 are actually fundamentally different games when you really think about them. Civ 5 is very much, you have these single cities, you do pretty much anything you've ever dreamed of in Lua, but you have very limited ability to interact between your units and the enemy units in terms of any abilities. Whereas Civ 6, you have this idea of kind of the scattered locales. I guess where you are on the map and the terrain around you is very fundamental to Civ 6's design. So many of the ideas around what the unique abilities were and the units were have actually changed a fair bit. Now, at this point, I'm pretty committed to the fact that this will actually come out, otherwise I wouldn't be talking about it here. But several of the abilities, I haven't finished coding them yet, so they may change due to limitations with the modifiers that I haven't experienced yet, or limitations with the Lua that I haven't experienced yet. So that's my disclaimer. I've got 2 leaders in the planned. One is Crowfoot, he'll be back, and the other is Running Eagle. There's been several Running Eagles in history. This Running Eagle is from the time when the English came in. the only female running eagle up to that point. Once again, I'm doing a faith and conquest civ for the Blackfoot, but I want it to very much not feel like a European faith and conquest civ. So the unique ability for the Blackfoot is that anytime they place an encampment district, or any building that goes in the encampment district, it will immediately give them a large burst of faith points based on nearby sources of fresh water. So the more fresh water you drop it by, the more faith you're going to get. Plus, anti-cavalry, so spearmen, cavalry, mounted, and ranged units that are trained in a city that has both an encampment and a holy site will start with a bonus promotion. So that will give them both this kind of like focus on building encampments, building holy sites, staying near water, but then also on having highly skilled warriors. There was a buffalo pound in Civ 5, replacement for water mills that spawned a buffalo resource nearby, and basically the buffalo resource gave you all the bonuses that the water mill would have gotten, while the buffalo pound basically did very little. This time, with the easier access to 3D art assets, I'm looking to build a buffalo jump, which would be a unique tile improvement that you can only build on top of a hill, and it would give you bonus housing and food, and then also production for adjacent pastures and camps. And this would be available very early in the game, so it would give you kind of a one-off bonus, but you'd only be able to build one per city. So there's a strong focus as well, kind of like there was in Civ 5, on experience and leveling up in this civilization. The way that works is kind of like a triad, if you will. Their special unit, I'm going to butcher this pronunciation, it's the AI Nikik Rider, or if you want to say it in English, the Warrior Society mounted guy. Originally what I wanted to do was replace the knight, but instead of making him a heavy cavalry replacement, make him another light cavalry, so you have a medium tier light cavalry. Now, of course, that means you're giving up some of the benefits of knights, because knights are kind of half siege units. But they have benefits to destroying districts, they have benefits to destroying walls, that sort of thing. They're going to lose all that, or most of that, in their first tier of cavalry. But the benefit that they do get with this unit is that when it is attacking other units, it gets 40% faster experience gain. And then, every time you build one, it will just kind of look across your whole map, and anytime it finds another one of these units that's higher level than it, that unit will also gain experience and give you extra faith. So, it's not just about build as many of these as you can and they'll all level up and they'll all give you faith. You have to actually have first gone out and taken the ones that you've already built and leveled up further than the ones you're building.
Makes sense.
And the reason for this was I did research into the Blackfoot warrior societies, and basically what happens is there's a limited number of spaces in the society, and the society is also actually several different societies that are ranked. And they're ranked by age, so a person over a certain age would be in a specific category. But they're also kind of based somewhat on merit, and this will theoretically give you a highly skilled set of mounted units, kind of in the medieval era. And then Crowfoot, his special ability is kind of two-tiered. The one is that when he is at war, he gets a bonus military slot. But as soon as he ends a war by declaring peace, all of his units that are in the enemy territory that he declared peace with immediately level up. Now, somebody said to me, somebody's going to abuse this system. They're going to fight a whole bunch of tiny wars and declare peace almost immediately, etc. And I was like, that's kind of the point. The point is short skirmishes where you run a couple guys into the enemy territory, beat a couple of his guys up, declare peace. If it becomes too ridiculous and I find out that people are just capturing a worker and declaring peace and capturing a worker and declaring peace, then I might actually make it that you have to have a city in your back pocket that you've captured. You may have to have at least captured a city, but we'll see. Running Eagle, she gives units a benefit when they are next to strategic resources. Her units don't lose combat strength for damage when they're next to horses or iron, whatever those resources that are out of the Blackfoot's reach, but which Running Eagle believes is necessary for their survival, and that she'll stop at nothing to get to, those resources will make her people unyielding when they take damage. And then the other thing that she's going to do, which is, I think, interesting, anytime one of her units kills a mounted unit, if you don't have a copy of that mounted unit anywhere at all, you don't have any knights, or maybe this is a unique unit and you don't have any of them, you will immediately get a free one. But only one, until that one dies. So that'll give kind of a weird strategy.
Oh, sounds good. Sounds interesting. And again, that's something completely different from any of the other civs out there.
Yeah, well, when Narai was describing this, I was thinking, and I thought my Scipio mod for Civ 5 was complex.
Yeah.
Well, I have to admit that one of the problems that I'm going to run into is that Civ 5 modders can pretty much do anything they want.
Yeah.
Given enough time, practice, know-how, if you want to make units that jump over opponent units when they attack them, you can do it.
Yeah.
Civ 6 is not like that, and so therefore, the disclaimer that I may find out that this design, although I have run it by several other modders who say that it should be feasible, there's a lot riding on that should be feasible part. But the thing that I wanted to definitely do was create a Faith and Conquest team that didn't scream, "Hey, Crusaders."
Yeah, or, hey, get an extra holy site early.
Right. The one thing about giving a burst of faith when you plant an encampment by a river, if you build an encampment by a river early in the game, it's your first district, you will instantly get a Pantheon. Guaranteed.
Yeah.
Hopefully that'll be out this year.
Yes. Well, fingers crossed, eh?
Crowfoot actually has a variant of Poundmaker's agenda. Poundmaker's agenda, of course, being like he wants the most alliances, and he doesn't like people who don't have alliances. Whereas Crowfoot also wants to have alliances, but he actually just doesn't like people who aren't friends with his allies.
Okay.
So he's going to try to build alliances, and he's going to basically fight wars against those people who aren't in his alliance group. It doesn't matter if they have alliances with other players. What this does is by mimicking each other's agendas, I'm hoping that without having to hard code in, these guys will always be allies. Running Eagle, I think some people are going to find her a little bit more lame. Sorry, she is basically just a strategic resource copy of Montezuma's agenda. She wants to have the strategic resources. If you have strategic resources she doesn't have, she's going to want to come and take them from you, basically. But unlike Montezuma's, where the diplomacy will be, messages are all around this idea that he's kind of jealous, a hoarder of things, it's going to be presented as more of a Running Eagle realizes that iron is necessary for her people to survive, and she doesn't have any iron.
Right.
So rather than just being this fierce person who hates you because you have iron and she doesn't, she's going to come across as, I need the iron. My people need iron if they're going to stay relevant in the coming age. Otherwise, we're all going to die, kind of thing. Same thing for uranium, apparently.
Right.
At this point, I am doing this as a solo project with a lot of help from more established Civ 6 modders, but it is not, at this point, to be seen as the, resurrection of colonialist legacies. This is the more Narai tries to teach himself how to make mods in Civ 6.
And so it should be. But that's the only way to do it, isn't it? To actually have a go dive in and create a game. Lee, what about your projects then?
Well, I've got 2 or 3 that I haven't published anywhere yet. And I'm working on trying to figure out some of the issues related to the really advanced setup light. I think I finally cracked why it doesn't work with Gedimine's True Start location thing.
Okay.
And that's because I was looking for settlers on the map, and Gedimine was killing all the settlers.
That's horrible.
So my code was saying, no settlers for this Civ, sorry. Hopefully I'll be able to push out an update to that in the near future to cure some of those issues. What I've been working on lately, other than the Big Dummy Buildings project, is if, for example, you clear a barb camp, you have a small chance of getting what I'm currently calling a triumphal arch placed in one of your cities. And it has a very small effect, but most of its effect is it allows you to build another building. And then once you build that one, you can build another building. Or if you're the first player to an era, classical and beyond, you get a science building added to essentially your capital. And it gives like +2 science. It's not a huge benefit, but it's just a nice little thing for being the first to an era. That unlocks some other buildings that you can also build that are science related. None of them have a huge impact, but first you got to be first to an era. Then you got to actually construct these other buildings. The same thing if you're the first to a civic within an era. If you research one of the classical era civics and no one else has a classical era civic, you have a chance of getting a cultural building in one of your cities. And that unlocks, again, some other buildings. And the way it works is if the culture building, you have a choice of one of 3 mutually exclusive buildings you can construct. And then all of those 3 mutually exclusive buildings allow you to build a second tier, which again is mutually exclusive. You can't build them all. You have to choose which one you want. So there might be one that is more military focused. So you look at, hey, I got this kudo building for being the first to research a civic from a particular era, and it got placed in this city here, and I could really use something defensive in that city. You could make that choice rather than, well, I just want more culture.
Right.
So that's one project, and I'm still working out the details in my mind on how to do that. This mod does not rely on needing to hide dummy buildings, and it does not rely on the dummy buildings system that I've been working on. It's a standalone mod. I simply locked out being able to construct these unlocker buildings, you might call them, simply by making them their own prerequisite. And that makes it so you can't get the building in any way except through Lua code.
Oh, yeah. Balance is always a fun one. Because if you balance things too low, then nobody builds them, so then why are they bothering?
Yeah.
I'm thinking to myself as well, one of the things that might be worthwhile, at least for the spawning automatically buildings, would be to ramp them up over time. Like, not the building gets more yield as you change eras, but rather that if I get a triumphant arch in the ancient era, it's worth X. But in the later era, it's worth X plus 3 or whatever. Just so that there is a catch-up mechanic. Possibly even saying that that is only the case if I haven't got one already, so that somebody who finally gets first in the modern era then catch up to somebody who hasn't. But then, of course, you run into the problems about what are the guys that have never done it.
You could have the buildings that change their use over time as well. So, like with your Triumphal Arch, maybe in the ancient sort of classical era, it could be something that would increase the likelihood of great generals generator. But as it got into the modern era, it was a culture thing rather than that, because it didn't create great generals anymore. It's an old thing. Something along those lines?
Yeah, I haven't really thought along those lines, but those are some interesting ideas to use.
The other thing that I was thinking about when you were talking about this was like, hey, I wonder if you could make almost like an alternative victory plot for get all the arches. Assuming, of course, that this would not be get all the arches because you've just been running away with the game the whole time, but get all the arches because it's a form of domination victory. Find all the arches and capture them.
Oh, yeah. All the ones that other players have gotten?
Yeah, exactly. It's not capture all the capitals. It's get a complete set of all the arches. I don't know how many arches there are. There might only be one, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
If, let's say, there's 7 arches, but it's almost impossible for you to actually have won all 7 of them, that would be the plan. You could then go find all 7 arches and capture them, and once you have the full set, you win the game. This is making your life harder.
I don't think I'm going to use that idea.
That's where you say, after I publish this, you can build a mod.
Yeah.
The other one that I was thinking about, because this has been on the back of my mind since the last ModCast, is the idea of doing the World Council, where Triumphant Arches could also give you points towards that. I'm a more influential civ because look at my Triumphal Arches.
Yeah, you go right ahead and mod that in there. Well, while on the subject, not only can you get it from clearing a barb camp, you can get it from conquering a enemy city. So there's a combat arch, there's a culture arch, and there's a science arch, which I need to come up with better names for some of these, but that's what I'm calling them right now.
Okay.
The culture and the science arch are based on you're progressing through the tech tree. And did you get to an era before the other guys? Did you research a tech from within an era before anyone else got that tech? And similar for the culture. Then I just have to work some more on the mechanics of how many times can you get the same kudo building in different cities. Because if you got 10 cities and all of them have got all 3 of these buildings, well then, nice for you, but everybody else is kind of ooped. So that's kind of one project I'm working on. The other one I've been working on is enacting a penalty based on the number of cities you have on the science and culture yield in all of your cities. So if you have 10 cities, then you get, for example, 20% less science and 20% less culture in all of your cities. If you have 5 cities, then that penalty is only half that. It's 10%. Trying to counteract a little bit the snowbally effect of, if you're playing on a huge map and it's getting filled out, you're going to end up probably having quite a few cities. And eventually you get to the point where you're just one-turning every science, every tech, every civic, 1-2 turns, boom. Next thing you know, you're in modern era and you haven't hardly played any turns. So it's something I'm playing around with, for trying to act as more of a natural break on that. The problem, again, is balance, because in the last experiment, I started on a pre-made really big map and filling it with cities to see how this worked out. Well, I got to the point where it didn't matter how many turns I spent after I got a certain number of cities. My time to research a given tech or civic never went down. Because I'm getting so much penalty buildup from the number of cities that I built on this pre-made map that none of my cities were producing anything.
So my advice, Lee, is to actually just get somebody to build you a UI banner that just says, your civ has entered the decadent age. And just call it a feature.
Yeah. So what I did as first step was I made the capital city of any player that you can set that's immune to this effect. And that helped, but then eventually, again, all those other cities started being a drain on what the capital was doing. So then I said, well, okay, we'll cap it at a 75% hit. And if it sounds kind of similar to the way Civ 5 dealt with culture and science, well, kind of where I got the idea. Because in Civ 6, it is a problem. And I think that's why Rise and Fall put in the loyalty thing. In vanilla Civ 6, more cities is always better, assuming you can defend them.
Yeah.
Yep. And if you have to put them in weird, odd places and they're on an iceberg floating out in the Atlantic, that sucks to be the people living in that city, but at least it's still better for you.
Yeah. I think I may make it so that if a city gets the science kudo building, it cannot get the culture one.
Cool.
Like, I think it depends on the playtesting, really.
Yeah.
But you're talking about a single city, too. I think that you'll find that it becomes difficult for a person to get multiples in a single building, in a single sitting, if I'm understanding this correctly. But you could have Civ that is narrow focus is culture and science. The Renaissance Italy stems to mind, where it's like, okay, culture is a big thing, but science is also a huge thing at the same time. So I don't know that they need to be exclusive. Maybe exclusive to a single city, though.
Yeah. I mean, when I played Civ 6, one thing I've noticed in particular is that if you concentrate on one thing, your opponents seem to concentrate on another and beat you. If you miss out on faith, for example, and concentrate on other issues, there'll be somebody who gets a faith victory. It seems to be more so than the other Civs, one where you've got to sort of put your fingers in all the pies, really, to kind of keep everything going to a certain level.
Yeah.
My feedback would be that if you have one city that ever gets, like, all the arches or all the things, something's clearly wrong.
Yes.
How many different arches are there?
There's a triumphal arch, which is combat related.
Right.
There's a science arch, and there's a cultural arch. All 3 of these unlock being able to build other buildings. So each one of these unlock a second building that adds a couple of points of culture in that. But each one of those unlocks a series that is, as long as you have any one of that second level, you can build one of the third level. And the third level is where the real power comes in.
Right.
Percentage yield modifiers to the city. There's more actual production or whatever being added by the building. But as far as the arches that are placed in your city randomly by you accomplishing some task, there are only 3 of those type.
Right. Okay. That makes sense.
I haven't done a faith one yet because I'm not sure what the trigger would have to be for a faith enabler, I guess I would have to call it.
Yeah, to a certain extent, the game already works that way, right?
Right.
I mean, yeah, you could say, okay, first person to found a pantheon, first person to found a religion.
But you're already getting the kudo for that.
Right, so I mean, first person to patronize a great person using faith?
Yeah, I'm not sure whether the Lua can detect that or not.
Right.
But still, for doing a faith kudo arch building, you would still just be mimicking what you already get for having faith. Which is, if you're the first to X faith points, you get your pantheon. After that, if you're the first to X points after that, you get your great profit. Or if you're the first to build the Stonehenge, you get a great profit. Either way. But those are already kind of baked into the game. So I don't know how you'd really do anything that would trigger off something you did faith-wise.
Right.
And if you went with, did you found a religion? Well, when you found a religion, you already get benefits.
Yeah, you get a religion.
Yeah. The other one, when you meet a city-state, I've got a mod that makes a pop-up that's like full screen, mid-screen. It gives you a bit more detail on who you met, what they want, etc. than that notification you get over to the side, which is real easy to miss.
That's really nice, actually, because the flip side of that, as well as if you pop out the panel, if you remembered to pop out the panel, then you're somewhat, I wouldn't say bombarded. I think bombarded is too harsh of a word, but there's a lot of information there, and it can be easy to get distracted a bit away from what exactly was it that I came here for?
Yeah.
And or all I really want to know is what's their suzerain bonus.
Obviously, I'm working on Anno Domini. That's a surprise, isn't it?
Surprise.
Well, I've been working on it in some format or other for different Civs for about 13, 14 years now, so I suppose it's no surprise really, is it? The mod was quite straightforward to upgrade to Ryzen 4. There wasn't too much to change to make it compatible, so that was okay. What I've been doing of late is having the facility to have other mods connected to it, because I recognise that it would be easier for me, or so I think, to have, for example, Socrates Senusret III, rather than trying to do the Civ 5 approach that I had of sort of absorbing him into the mod and then making it one massive download. So that's gone kind of okay. And I've found that I've needed to kind of do some code that comes in before and after the mods are all loaded. And the config bit got me something which says, hey, if Socrates Senusret III is loaded, then he's in. But then there also needs to be something that goes in after everything else is loaded that looks back and says, right, okay, so this particular leader has an archer, which in the normal game is going to be strength of so much. However, in Anno Domini, it needs to be more because he's gone from being ancient age in the main game to an Anno Domini being sort of a mid-game player. So there has to be something then that reevaluates the values. Whilst I've had to modify some values within there to make it match Anno Domini, it's meant that the mod itself can be played as the original creator designed that particular Civ within Anno Domini. And I think that may appeal to some creators, it might not. But when creating Civs such as Assyria and Akkad, then what better to have somebody come up with a game which they would fit right in, truly be immersed in, because that's the right era for those particular Civs. So that's what I've been doing there. Some of these are working better than others, and hopefully I can persuade some of the modders to build in compatibility for Anno Domini at some point. In the meantime, I've got my own base set of Civs that I've created myself, plus the ones that were in the game automatically, like Rome, Egypt, Persia, those kind of things. I've been able to learn how to do a couple of the art things that I couldn't do before, so I can do historic moments now. I've come up with some decent, okay-looking units. I wouldn't say they'd be award-winning units by any stretch of the imagination, but just doing things like with the battle cart for the Samaria, I've changed donkeys, so I've changed that for horses. I've changed the look of the driver and the warrior that's in the cart. And actually, it does have a look of a slightly different unit.
I've seen it. It looks good.
Yeah. It looks okay, I think.
Back in Civ 5, unit art was always the worst thing for Colonius Legacies. Basically, the model was get the formation, take a barbarian unit from here, and a settler unit from here, and maybe an elephant unit from here, and put them all together, and hope that nobody really notices that that's what you did. And they would look kind of new. But what is really nice, from what I'm hearing, and you're saying, you seem to be confirming this too, Rob, is that Civ 6 lets you do that with a lot more granularity. It's not just one whole model. switch out individual components of the model and do that relatively easily.
Yeah. As you can imagine, when you're doing any kind of mod that covers a specific era and needs a lot of units, there's not a lot of units out there that just is in that particular era. So initially, when I did the very first version of Anno Domini 4 Civ 6, there weren't any unique units for any of the civs because I'd used them within the tree. But now what I'm able to do is, like with the battle cart, say, right, you can have the battle cart back to some area, and I can then use that battle cart model, create a different look for it, and then that becomes the generic unit for everybody else. Now I've got used to doing it, and knock out one of those models within an hour.
Wow.
The other thing I noticed as well, for Axis, for the asset viewer, where you can actually view what's happening with these units that you're creating, that is only available for the base game. So you've got no DLC bits and no unit parts for the expansion either. However, you can still do it if you know what you're doing through the asset editor. You just can't view them. And anybody that hasn't got that particular expansion or that DLC that you've used the bits of will just see this quite odd-looking character, whereas anybody that has got the DLC or the expansion pack that you need the bits for will actually see a proper unit. So, yeah, it's interesting. I think what would be great, and I can't see that anybody would doing it at the minute, would be if somebody could create extra bits. So we're not talking necessarily about units as such, but parts that could be then used with units. So if for Axis are listening, what would be great is if your artists have some time on their hands waiting for the next project, it would be great to see some of those bits created. Once that happens, then even your basic common or garden modder, of which I may be one, could create quite a whole range of different looks for the units.
Right, and with this bits system, every unit that is added with bits
Yes.
exponentially increases the things you can do.
Once I've got everything in place, which it's sort of fall into place now, I think I need more late-end stuff in terms of techs and in terms of civics, which I've not put in because it's becoming a little bit samey. Go back, just have a look at what I've got in there and maybe change some of the effects, etc. The other thing I see as well, I want to put in some new districts that are Anno Domini based. So I was thinking of having, for example, the Seleucids. I'm not going to have in the game, but I am going to use some of their bits and pieces, such as the Agora. But I was thinking of having like a pottery district and a couple of different new districts in there to mix things up a little bit, which I think might or might not work. Things that aren't available yet that we'd like to have to help us mod. For instance, we know how, if there's a resource in a particular slot, we know how to use that resource to say, right, well, if there's, for example, if you want to do a cattle ranch and you want +2 food for every work cattle tile, then you use requires cattle in plot and all the other bits for that modifier, and it all works nicely. But what isn't there is a modifier to say you can only build that cattle ranch if there's a cattle tile within the local area, and that I think we need.
Well, we already have that, Rob.
Oh, have we? And I don't realise it.
It's called dummy building systems.
Oh, no, I mean without dummy buildings.
Oh!
Yeah, I'm talking without dummy buildings.
Yeah, I would like that too.
Get rid of all these dummy buildings and use modifiers instead.
Yeah, except they can't possibly keep up with what's needed.
Now that I'm actually doing the modding stuff and looking at the modifiers, I'm actually surprised how much there is. But you're right, there's kind of like these gaps where it's like, oh, but there isn't, it has adjacent resource or something. But there is actually quite a lot that can be done with modifiers. I'm slightly enjoying being told by people that you can't do things with modifiers and looking through all the modifiers and going, actually,
Yes, you can.
maybe it's a bit of a pain how many steps you have to go to do it, but you can do it. And then I'm hoping, at least sort of believing, that modifiers are a little bit more stable than Lua is in terms of their changing with the weather.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, there's lots of stuff you can do with modifiers, but there's these holes in what they thought of. And the problem is the modders are already pushing into those holes. And for Firaxis to be able to keep on top of that constantly is going to be... I can't see how they're going to be able to do it. They've got to ask themselves, is it of value to us as a company to create that game effect just because 3 modders want it?
Right.
Support the ongoing Polycast Patreon campaign.
Collective achievements.
Personal incentives.
Month-to-month commitment.
A thank you to lead patron Candace Albinus and all other supporters of the show through this measure. For more information, visit thepolycast.net/Patreon.
Calling today. In North America, the number is 301-637-7659. In Europe, 44121-288-7659.
The only thing worse than being talked about is not being talked about.
For more information on ModCast, log on to the series' official website at thepolycast.net. So the thing with the fact that there's multiple leaders now and those being the go-to things for some people to mod, so it's a lot easier to a leader, of course, than a full civ. The colours are going to run out at some point, or seem to be getting a bit along that line of they look very similar, but do they really if they're next together?
My number one beef with how Civ 6 has turned out, which is a funny number one, is that when Firaxis did the multiple leaders thing, they chose to make the multiple leaders different colors.
Yeah.
As opposed to, say, having different icons at the same color.
Yeah.
Oops.
I think...
Yeah, you're going to run out of colors.
We were already doing that in Civ 5.
Yeah, or where the color difference is so slight, satisfies the game, but the person playing it can't really tell the difference between Aztec A and Quaddle Civ.
Yeah. Is it too late, do you think, for Firaxis to have a change of heart? If they were to decide that they're going to bring out another expansion and they decide that the leaders in that, it's going to be back to same colour for each civ and different badge, so to speak. Do you think it's too late for modders to turn that round?
I don't think it's too late. I mean, I don't even think that it would be too late for modders to change it now.
No.
Just say, listen, this is going to, I'm going to produce a mod. Sparta now is the same color as Pericles, or vice versa, and maybe more vice versa. And then here's the new icons. But I used to joke with T-Pang that when we were making Civilization 5 mods at the end, the largest part of the design process was negotiating with all the other modders about what color the civ was going to be.
That was ModCast 76. Thank you for joining us. It's the 7th of April today. Rob R8XFT, and joining me today were
Lee S.
Nor the Forgiven.
Thank you. See you next time. Bye.
All right. Talk to you guys later.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Bye. Well, that looks like a fairly decent list to at least kind of work to. So maybe we should officially start it. And
Give us a moment.
what?
Right. Just needed a quick moment.
I thought we lost Rob there for a second until I heard the toilet.
I guess I need to no, I'll skip that. Forget what I was going to say there. Hello?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
I thought for a moment.
I just ran out of coal in the train.
Never heard that happen before.
So, Dan, we're having a moment of silence here.
Yes. I'll just wait for Norai to come back.
Yeah, I slipped out here a few minutes ago.
Yes.
Too much coffee this morning.
Yeah.
Although there really is no such thing. The only problem is if you don't have a toilet handy, it's...
It is. Yeah.
If you make something too powerful, obviously, it's like, okay, Now you just got an instant push button, win button there. Oh, hang on a second. Hello. Never mind. Where was I?
This one for the gag reel.
Yeah.
Record date 7th of April 2018. Civilization 4 and 5 sound clips. Copyright Take-Two Interactive. Copyright Civilized Communication at civcom.net.